Lee is an energy intuitive and transformation guide who offers grounded teachings. He has popular online monthly energy updates and retreats all around the globe that inspire others to bring their unique gifts to the world. Give it up for Lee Harris, everyone. Lee Harris, so glad to have you here, my friend.
So glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
One of the first people I thought of when Optimystic got kicked off, I was like, Lee is a must-have, and you were so quick to oblige, and here we are. And
it's amazing. So well done to you and the whole team for creating this.
So why don't you start by giving us a little bit of background into who the heck Lee Harris is?
Yeah, wow, that's a question. I'm still trying to work. Every day it changes, right? So I ended up doing work in this field of consciousness because as a kid, kind of my story of sensitivity is that my way of dealing with my feelings that I didn't know how to deal with was to binge eat and to eventually gain a ton of weight and then go through bulimia, and kind of eventually came out the other side of it when I was about 17, 18 with a metaphysical awakening. So I managed to start to unpick how I couldn't deal with the world through suddenly realizing there were dimensions far beyond anything that I had previously experienced. But suddenly it was like, oh my God, this makes sense. This world makes more sense, and so does the world of free emotion. So it was it was going for tarot readings and having really deep physical reactions in those readings that other friends weren't talking about. And it was things like the Oprah Winfrey Show, where I was 16 and she would talk to people about their feelings. And I was like, oh my, this is, to me, this was, yeah, I mean, especially in Britain, at that time, because I'm 43 now. So it was a very different time. And suddenly the Oprah Show was one of many things that made me able to breathe for the first time in life and kind of have oxygen. So what happened to me then was more surprising, I think, because I was really on a personal development journey, and I was a huge fan of like metaphysics and all that kind of stuff. And I was taken to a channeler, but I was skeptical of the channeler because he was a beautiful man. He was really nice, very kind. And I remember having the reading with him and coming away and thinking that the reading was very wise, but I had that natural skepticism of why did he have to have his eyes closed and have a slightly weird voice?
Right.
It's just, it wasn't that I didn't believe him, I found that confusing.
Right.
And then of course the joke is now on me because...
That's what you do.
Yeah.
Hypocrite.
Yeah, totally. So I'm actually really compassionate around skepticism of channeling. I totally get it. I'm like, I get it. I was you. And I wasn't looking to channel. I didn't think that would happen to me. And I was minding my own business one day on the Underground in London and going through all the kind of problems I had in my head and all my own, self-attack and all the stuff that I had going on. And literally on the left, and still to this day, this is the position I hear them when I speak to them, I heard, that's a very interesting thought, but you're wrong.
Oh, wow.
And here is why.
Wow.
And it was like, and they explained how what I was seeing and interpreting was, I was kind of focusing on this, and what they did was they went, and suddenly I was like, oh my God, and my whole body changed. It wasn't just my mind kind of getting the answer, it was like, oh, everything relaxed. And suddenly I was more open again. So that was my kind of initiation with my guides. And and then 5 years later, I was kind of pushed into doing it as a job, not thinking anyone would come, and the rest is 15-year history, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating trajectory. It's like, I've heard this story so many times from people that I've had on, Positive Head, or even on this show already, people who are tapping in or able to channel. And it's, how I've always approached it as someone who's never felt like I'm necessarily channeling some other entity or what have you. I've always approached it like you said, with a sense of healthy skepticism, like, okay, what is the information that's coming through? Is it any weirder that something would come through you than the fact that you're sitting there at all? We've just gotten used to the fact that how weird it is that we even exist. Like, where did we come from, right? So we've just gotten really used to that. So for me, I just am always, what is being said? What is the information? Is it really resonating? Does it feel like profound, and a lot of the time it just does. Some of my favorite teachers on the planet claiming to channel something beyond their physical self that is just like, wow, that's mind-blowing information. And people like Rasha and Abraham and Bashar and all, you know, they're just this incredible information coming through. And then you look at their lives, and they're very well adjusted, healthy, happy. They're not like, you know, this crazy person running around on the street talking to themselves. It's, you know, it's sort of, for me, it's a validating, you know, for someone who hasn't had the experience of feeling like I'm necessarily channeling. But then there's the other side of that where some people say, well, all art, we're constantly channeling in some way.
Oh yeah, and funnily enough, for me, songwriting happened about a year before I heard my guides. And I'd been a lifelong lover of music. I had sung as a kid, but I never thought I would write music. And a year before I heard them, I started hearing fully formed melodies in the ethers. Often all the lyrics were there. And so in a way, my channel was opening before contacting them anyway. And so no, I mean, we're channeling our lives every day. And I think for me, you know, I've always said, like, if I died and someone said, you know, by the way, that channeling thing, that was just a construct. I'm like, okay,
sure.
I don't really care. Like, I've never overly cared about the origin of people's channel. And there are groups of people who do that, and I'm grateful they do because they've recorded all this information. I'm all about the effect. I'm like, if it works for you, fantastic. Exactly. I don't care if you're getting it through archery or channeling or whatever. If it's helping you to open to yourself. And the one thing that they've always said, which I see is true, is that the more we learn to open, the more benevolent a force on the planet we become. And that doesn't mean on Thursday that will happen if on Monday you're coming out of a wound. You know, you might go through a kind of wrangly phase for a while. But if you continue on the path of opening yourself to spirit and to healing as much of the kind of dents and wounds and bruises that we've all taken on because we live here on the planet, then you do start to become a more magnetic and benevolent force for others, whether you are an extrovert or an introvert. You know, you might do it in very hidden ways, you might do it in very obvious ways. And so that was always the kind of hook for me, because my own ego didn't like the idea of having to come out as a channeler. And even with the book I published this year, it was like, you know...
Mine doesn't either.
Yeah, no,
I always thought, like, no, I'm going to be Brandon. I'm sticking by this. Like, I'm riding this thing out, you know?
You know, for me, it's more having to... Because, you know, division is like the thing that none of us really want to see or experience on the planet. Anything that's going to be another division, I was like, oh, Jesus, I was the fat kid, and then I had to come out as gay, and I was like, not this, you know what I mean?
Now I'm the gay
It was like, now this? You know, it just didn't feel, I was like, really? But then I also see how that has been my growth. It's like, yeah, here's your growth edge, stand for it. If someone talks to you and has a projection on you, that's life. So it's actually been, you know, brilliant, of course.
Yeah, I believe it's also just like relative truths in you know, like this idea that you and I are separate. We can make an argument for that most people would agree with. You and I are one. We can make an argument for that. And, you know, there's certainly something that I subscribe to that is actually going on. The consciousness that animates my form is the consciousness that animates your form. The separation between us is illusory. And so these ideas of other beings, even what a lot of people that I've, you know, having talked to a lot of people who are channeling, you know, it's like, oh, these are other versions of myself, right? And at some level, if it's all one, that you are all, you know, there's one of us in the room right now. So it's like, from what vantage point are we speaking? So it really makes it less weird when you start thinking about it like that. Like, oh, we do this segregation thing only so this is how God experiences herself, right? Yes. By taking on different forms and being able to sort of have this contrast. And so from one perspective, it's creating separation. From another, it's just like a fancy, you know, illusion altogether, right?
Completely. And I think that's why, to me, channeling was like a rabbit hole, because when I first started asking those questions, and I would go home every day and I would write questions that were kind of personal and then universal, what I realized was, you know, the more answers you get, the more questions you have. And I think if you approach it from a linear, oh, this is going to help me solve this, this, and this on the earth. No, it's going to take you way beyond the earth, and it's going to continually invite you to an unfolding mystery that we can only see that much of.
Yeah.
So I think that was fascinating for me too. It's like, oh, I see why people with very scientific minds can struggle with this concept because there aren't finite answers. There are answers that then lead to more questions, and that for me was like, oh wow, this is endless.
And if they're being honest about science, that's the same thing, right?
Exactly.
It's like, don't hold on too tight because that scientific theory or law is all of a sudden going to get blown up in 5 years, perhaps, or 5 days. So it's it's very interesting to see how all that's unfolding for scientists. And I feel like science and spirituality is really doing a dance right now like it never has before.
Yeah, which is great.
It really is. It's really incredible. So for you, when you're channeling, who and what, how do they identify? You said they. So.
Yeah, so I said, do you have a name? And they're like, well, we don't have names, but humans like names. So you can call me Zachary. I'm the lead spokesperson. And they said, we are a group of 88 guides. And they said, but we then extend wider into source. So they said, in some ways, we're more of a consciousness library than we are fixed beings. Yes, some of us have been incarnate on the earth plane. Others of us have been incarnate elsewhere, but we come together as a kind of force so in a way it's like they who I'm channeling are channeling, which of course is what we're all doing, right? So for me, it was never very fixed because they never explained it to me in a fixed way, whereas I've met people who've gone, oh, I'm channeling this angel, or I'm channeling this. So for me, it was a little different. And what started to happen was the more I worked with them, the more my own intuition kind of went up several notches. So when I'm channeling them, I call them the Z's because that's what people who followed my work started to refer to them as, because they gave multiple names that all began with Z. So there was Zachary, there was Zydora, there was Zaphariah. And then at a certain point, they stopped differentiating and they said, we're just going back to one voice because it's most important. Oneness is more important on the planet than division. So we're going to just go back to one voice when I do channel the guides. Yeah.
Interesting. So it's like the zoo, the spirit guide zoo.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Z, it'll work. All right, sorry. So
that was like the best moment of this whole conversation so far.
All right, so out of the zoo and back into reality, if there is such a thing. You do energy updates monthly that are quite popular, and I find it really fascinating. Every month when it's a new month, I'm thinking, oh where's Lee's update? And I'm curious, is that coming through the Z's? Is that something that you're tapping into separately and apart?
I mean, it's all connected, right? So for me, why the energy updates were important was I personally, I could have these enormous experiences, but then integrating the damn thing was like a whole other thing. So I was really curious about we can absorb higher frequencies, we can have these multidimensional experiences, we can have these big healings, but then it's interesting what the human does with it and what our human aspects, personality, emotions, our energy field, how do we bring that into the body? So for me, the energy update was wanting to kind of give a guide to the people who resonate with how it comes through me as to what you might be seeing showing up in the collective. So it starts very much with the Z's these days. So they will give me 3 or 4 headlines, and I'll literally just tap in and go, what are the 3 or 4 headlines? And then I don't think about it anymore until I turn the camera on, and then I just let it come through. And I usually walk away and I'm like, oh, I could have said that. But I now know it's not my place to interfere. It's my place to just put it out there and let it resonate for who it resonates for.
How long have you been doing this?
I started doing them on video in 2012, and I almost stopped doing them in like 2014, 2015, a couple of times. I don't know if it was quite uncomfortable for me to do them years ago. And I've got to the point where I'm able to just switch into it and switch out. But there were times when it was a little intense, and I didn't always enjoy it the day after they went out because I would feel really like this while they were on the internet, and luckily I grew up.
It's something that I was thinking about before walking out and doing the monologue, and you and I were talking before, all the whole taping started today, and I was commenting how it's gotten, with each episode, it's just gotten a little easier, a little less prep, less, just more relaxed, and it's like, it's really interesting how with everything in our life, as we grow, we approach that growth edge. At first, it's a little bit uncomfortable, almost always. And when you know that you're going to acclimate, we're meant to be these malleable beings that can stretch, and ultimately, the more you do it, the more comfortable it gets. It's like, I sit down with the guests who are going to come out in a bit podcasting. It's always interesting to me because every time they're a little nervous because they've never done it. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've done this like now in my sleep so many times I don't even think about it. Whereas if I think back to episode 1, I was probably like, so I think that's an interesting thing just in general for everyone to consider. Like whenever you are feeling that, whenever something excites you and scares you a little bit, know that at first you're going to have wobbly legs, but ultimately we all acclimate, right?
Yeah, I call it contraction before expansion. So, the example that I always think of is, how if you're a kid and you're like excited all week to go to this party and you're like, oh, and the parents are like, oh, she's so excited or he's so excited. And then they take you to the party and you're like this against the wall. And they're like, come on, you wanted to, we kind of, which we all, right? But we all do it. And I think it's twofold. Like I do think it's our own personality or fear, or for me sometimes it's being willing to go in the work I do, it's being willing to become a bit more extrovert, and it's like the tantrum my introvert's having that I'm gonna go and do a thing with a load of people. But actually I think it's the energy. So for example, even with something like this, coming here this afternoon, I was quietly at home. It was all kind of like introverted, and I was like, but I now know enough about that reaction. It's like, oh, well, this will probably be good, and it means something expansive is going to happen with these people and in this room, and so it's the part of us that goes like this before we go like this. And I wish someone had nailed that principle for me 10 or 12 years ago when I was doing this kind of work, because if I'd have just had that in my head back then, I would have saved myself a lot of torment.
That's why I wanted to point it out right now, because I feel like it's such an important piece. A lot of times people will approach and feel that piece and say, oh, yep, this isn't for me, and they don't push through that growth edge. And for me, I visualized it. It came to me recently as a visualization of what happens when you're on the beach. You see the tide, it pulls back, and it's like retraction, and then all of a sudden here comes all the water again. And when you start to understand that energy flows in that way, you can sort of know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I don't think fear is the problem. I think our inability to manage our fear is the problem. Or some idea, like people will say, oh, blah, blah, so confident, so fearless. And it's like, no, they're not fearless. They just know when the fear swells that another part of them or the support they have in their life or their experience allows them to go, oh, this is a bit uncomfortable, but I'm just going to go a bit forward and I know it will be. I think that's all it is. And everybody I've ever met who is doing something courageous, whether it's like leaving their marriage or whether it's, something they do in a more public arena in their community, or everybody I've ever met, if you really talk to them, that growth edge, that crackle needs to be there when we're doing big stuff. And I think that's one of the myths that we were kind of sold. I used to look at people in the public eye and think, oh, wow, they've, look there. And it's not true at all.
Right.
Like, if you really talk to them about what they're going through.
They power through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard it said the only thing, and I can't remember I can't attribute it to who said it originally, but the only thing to fear, of course we've all heard the only thing to fear is fear itself. And maybe it was Tony Robbins, the only thing to fear is the fear of fear. And that one really hit me as an interesting, like, we're scared of being scared, and really it's like being scared to do your homework. Once you sat down to do it, it wasn't nearly as bad as what you thought it was going to be, right?
And yet, isn't it interesting that horror movies are like some of the most popular movies right now, and they're the ones that I'm really interested in movies and kind of what they do in culture.
Me too.
And like everybody's going to see horror movies, and they're very low budget to make, so studios are like pumping them out, and I'm like, this is fascinating. People want to be scared in a nice contained environment.
Right.
So it's like there's something in us that knows that fear is part of our life, but some people seek it through horror movies and other people through going balls to the wall in their life.
Right. So with your energy updates, I'm curious, obviously it's always very interesting to tune in and see what's happening that month. As someone who's always so interested in like the I find myself so interested in like the bigger picture, like where are we going to be in 100 years? Or where was I 1,000 years ago? Who are you to me in a past life? Whatever. I always want to know like this more expanded view. So I'm curious how that piece plays out for you with having, this sort of
Yeah.
perspective that you have.
Well, I remember being very triggered. I saw the internet movie Zeitgeist, and then 3 years later, I saw Zeitgeist's friendlier cousin Thrive, which many of you know. It's like, this is the one that terrifies you, and this is the one that scares you, but then shows you there are solutions.
Yeah, right.
It's like, I'm glad this one came out a few years later. And I remember being very triggered through that whole period, and it was definitely a kind of breakdown of some of my belief systems of what the world was at the time. And, I channeled a lot with them around that. And they were always like, no, don't worry. There are things that are going to play out in the next few decades that are going to happen over a very long period of time. Much of this is going to be averted. Some of it is going to come to the surface, but they were always really adamant about it. And I mean, I go back to 2011 as a time when there were a ton of predictions. Like everybody was like, this is going to happen in March. And, and I had intuitive friends who I trusted who'd be like, you better. And I'd be like, oh God, am I missing the point here? And they were always right. They've kind of said that this period that we're in now, so especially this period to 2024 is really key. They've always said the question is how much damage and how much loss has to be here in order to make the transition. But they're always saying, no, humanity is making a huge transition. And the question is not, will it make the transition? The question is, how messy will it get before you get there? And one thing they've said over the last few years that feels very true to me is they say, you have no idea how much better it is now than it could have been. Really? Where timeline's different. And I've started to see evidence of certain things that they've said beginning to appear in popular, kind of culture. And so it's always interesting because I always surrender to the fact that I am one of many ants on the planet, and it is a mystery. But it's interesting when I hear what they will say about where we're going and why we're going through this period that we're going through. It's always very interesting and very on point for me.
Do you have any when the information comes to you? Does it come visually? Is it like you're hearing?
Yeah, I'm a little bit visual, but I'm very word and feeling based.
Okay.
Which is why for me, I can be very empathic as an intuitive. So if someone is in front of me, I tend to get a sense of how they're feeling, what they're feeling, and how that's syncing up with their psyche. And that's not something I turn on all the time because it would make life annoying. But it is something that I can turn on and I can target when I want to and when I need to. But words, it's very word-based for me. Words and feelings.
Cool. Yeah. So have they given you any, okay, so you're saying up to 2024, how about, has there ever been like, okay, Lee, we're going to give you like the full, it's like you said you love movies. Okay, sit back. We're going to give you the download on what, 2388 looks like, or...
No, I think sorry,
put
Brandon.
In the call.
Sorry.
Come on. We got popcorn.
Yeah. But I'll send you an email on Monday. No, and they're very. It's interesting because they're very cautious about timeline information. There's one thing they said. They said you have to be careful how you can get co-opted around timelines. So they basically talked about. If enough of us believe a story that's going on, that has been planted, we will help to make it happen. Yep. And so, that was like a huge wake-up call for me about 7-8 years ago. So I'm very mindful of what I see, and if I notice my own reactions, I kind of process them and kind of come back to whether I think this is true, is this true, is it all a little bit true, but I can choose how to influence it in my life and be part of the collective influencing it. So no, they talk about the timelines being open. And they talk about things are changing all of the time at such rapid speed. So they can't give concrete, they can't say, no, in 2030 it's going to look exactly like this. But some of the things that they have talked about for this period we're in now, which wasn't thrilling but isn't too surprising, they talked about health. They talked about human health in the coming decades and how that's going to be a challenge area, but that's going to be an area that will expose a lot of why there are so many health issues on the planet. And so it's that kind of awkward knife edge thing of things often have to get messy for us to understand how to tidy up the mess underneath. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Very, very interesting. So you do workshops and retreats, and I guess you have quite a few that I've taken a quick look at. And what out of the ones that you've done have resonated the most? Do you feel like?
Well,
And why?
yeah, it's interesting. We do an annual retreat called Soul Magic, which is 7 days, and it's in Costa Rica. And that definitely is, I would say, a real launch pad, because not only do the people who come, we kind of look at the year ahead. It's interesting. I will channel, but we'll also just do a lot of work on where are you going and who do you want to be in the next year. So that's always an interesting map for me of kind of the themes of the year ahead. But I would say recently I have a course called Empaths versus Narcissists. The subtitle.
The showdown.
Yeah. And people tried to talk me out of that title, but I was like, no, that is the title. And the tagline is a power dynamic and how to recover from it. Wow. And that's a course that I launched kind of reluctantly. I didn't really want to tackle that topic, but it was so much in the work I was doing with personal clients. I used to do a lot of one-on-ones, and it was something I'd had experience with. I'd kind of fallen out of a few heavily empath, narcissist, imbalanced relationships in my life. So it was interesting. It just was a course that really resonated with a lot of people, and we're running it live again, and I'll probably relaunch it next year. But I didn't really think about that topic showing up in the collective when we were creating that course as much as, of course, it has over the last couple of years. So just this place that we give our power away. And it's not so much about overly diagnosing the narcissist or focusing on the person who may have either been a true narcissist in your life or your own behavior had allowed them to take a bigger piece of the pie. It's more about where do we get ourselves embedded in patterns with other people where we are giving too much power to one very questionable driver in the car, rather than both sharing the wheel. So that has been a topic that I would say has shown up a lot in my work. That and boundaries, which is a very controversial one in the spiritual arena, because of course people are like, but I just should be open and love everybody. And I'm like, yeah, you can get there.
It's all one.
But
Come over here.
Yeah, let's just check. Let's just check where your boundaries are too, because if you can really be open when you know what your boundaries are, and to know that boundaries will change and be fluid, but to be able to have them is really important. And it's something that I've seen and experienced a lot of suffering with in the consciousness field. So yeah, I think that relates back to the work of boundaries in order to let us be as open as possible.
Yeah. It's interesting when you take these challenging figures that I think everyone's dealt with, someone who's very narcissistic. Probably everyone out there has had an experience or been that person and recovered from it, hopefully. And when you sort of understand that these people are also there as a tool for you to really understand where to put your boundaries, and they're helping you. I think for me that really helps to bring forgiveness into the equation, which is necessary to sort of heal from an experience.
Yeah, and I think also one of the things I really didn't get in my own life for a long time is, if you are coming from an empathic place, and sure, we can all be narcissistic, a bit more closed, a bit more defended. We're all going to go through a spectrum. But if you generally come from a place of, I want to connect, I want to be open, you can kind of, take on projects of other people that is far too big for you are not the person who is going to be their medicine. You might be a part of it, but there's also a kind of ego in that too, that the empath has to kind of reckon with and go, oh my God, I was not willing to let this relationship end with a fracture. I was determined, so I stayed in the ring far too long, thinking that I could be the one that could bring all the light to this. And I think that's a really painful, grief-inducing lesson. And it's hard, and it kind of hurts. But if you're willing to kind of go, oh my God, if I let this go, where is my energy going to be welcome, and also investigate why it's more comfortable for me to be the one sending my energy this way than it is to have someone coming to me sending energy to me. And sometimes it's trauma, and we all have the ability to overcome our traumas, to overcome the parts of us that have held us back from having really beautiful connections with people. And it's ongoing work. But I think for a lot of empaths too, there can be that, you can be the unwanted healer in the room. It's like, everyone else is going, I wish she would just retire that. And I wish she would just talk to me about something else. But, sometimes people are determined.
Yeah.
So
no, you're getting better.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really interesting dynamic. So it's very complex. And that's why I think, that's why I think this course that I created, when I started, ended up being like 15 hours of videos.
Wow.
Because there are so many dimensions to it. So it's a fascinating topic for all of us, I think, to look at.
Well, you also did one about owning your self-worth, correct? Which really ties into that as well, right? How many people out there are, the amount of people that I hear, and of course having retreat guests come through all the time, I realize there's so many people that I sit down with or connect with who there's blockage of not feeling worthy.
Yes.
And I think those narcissistic relationships probably happen more frequently to someone who's in that space, or helps to keep someone in that space.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious what you're...
Well, it's interesting because you were a part, so I created this event called Impact the World, and it was something I felt really compelled to do. It was a little bit of a tangent for me, but I found that when I would go for dinner with friends who were in this field, I would end up talking to them about the work they were doing and the nuts and bolts of how they put the work out into the world. Because I find it so creative, like making things happen. Sure, you can be a visionary, but if you're not an architect and a builder, nothing's going to happen. So I was really fascinated to help people who perhaps were great visionaries but were too scared to architect their work into the world, or they were great architects but they hadn't worked out that you're never going to be the one to edit the video because it's just your ADHD is getting in the way of the editing, and that's okay. But let's kind of recognize that, and let's find the person who can edit for you. Oh, but I don't know if my video is good enough. So self-worth was stopping them. And so when I did this Impact the World training, I remember the 2 modules that really triggered the room, because we did a kind of inside the entrepreneur's body and outside the things that you do in the world and how you put it into the world. And it was money, and it was all about the money around their work, and it was all around working and hiring a team and working with teams of people. And that blew my mind, because I went into this presenting like 24 modules. I had guest speakers, you included.
Right.
You were fantastic, all about podcasts and what a podcast is in essence and how to do it. And it blew my mind that, this brave group of souls who'd come from all over the world froze when we talked about money and when we talked about teams. And I was like, oh, okay. So I ended up creating Own Your Value as an online course, because I thought, oh, this is a key foundational issue for us. And I get it. I think back to the early days of me doing this work, and I was always wanted to be validated by like Hay House or somebody.
Right.
And I never was. So it's like, well, now I'm thrilled because I kind of am able to own what I do, and I'm able to employ the team, and we're able to calibrate the vibration that we want, and to put free stuff out there, and the people who pay for stuff pay for everybody's wages and how we put it out into the world and the level of production that I want behind it. So, but it's interesting, because if I had been allowed to not own my value early on, I would have let someone else kind of represent me. And I'm really glad I didn't. I'm really glad that the universe said, no, you're staying on your own, and you're going to learn it the hard way. But in the end, it will be better for you.
Right. Yeah. See, that's huge. So many people feel like, okay, I need to go and get, this big validating sponsor behind me, or some big name, and you just, those days are over. The world is like, just even in the last decade, you have a direct line to the entire world. Like, you need that so much less than we ever have. Maybe in the 50s, if you're going to get on the, get your music heard, you had to go through a certain channel. Not anymore. And so it's really empowering to know that, you getting into your authentic best and brightest self. And and it's going to find the people that are a vibrational match.
Completely. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier, which is be willing to be scared, but don't let the fear stop you.
Yeah.
So, one of the examples I give in the Impact the World program is don't worry about your production value or how many people you're reaching. If 22 people have watched your video, that's 22 people. Like, imagine 22 people standing in front of you. That's amazing. That's brilliant. And I think a lot of people go, oh, well, I'm not quite ready. And, one of my favorite people in the last couple of years, we have dementia in my family. And it's this woman on YouTube who has really low production quality on her videos. And I'm so grateful to her because her information is brilliant. She has stuff to help families with dementia. And I have watched so many of her videos and, but yeah, the production quality isn't there, but it doesn't matter because she's got a really important message. So she's got loads of us watching and grateful to her because she's helping us. And so I think that's it. It's like, just get in the pool and start swimming.
Yep.
Don't worry about your bikini, how it looks. Don't worry about dredging the pool. Just start swimming. And things will start to happen. And I think we all need to hear that. Like, we all have our fear moments or fear days, and we all need someone to just go, come on, just do it. So, yeah.
That stops a lot of people, is that I've got to be the best, most perfect, professional, whatever, before I even start. And it's like, actually, you get to that point by practicing and by putting yourself out there.
And you will probably never think you are the best because that's not how it works. You'll go, next time I'm going to, because that's the path of the creator. It's like you learn every time how to refine. So yeah, it's all in the eye of the beholder. And the way we see ourselves is usually a very cracked mirror. Yeah.
I like to say perfect is the enemy of good enough. And, do something that's good enough and start moving. And momentum will build and more energy will flood in, more, we respond, right? We take feedback, and that gives us more information. If you're sitting on the sidelines thinking about getting in the pool forever and just adjusting your bikini, then you never have the chance to really learn how to swim. So.
Well, and even this, like, I think what you're doing with your team here, you're creating an experience for all of us in this room that will be very different for anybody who's watching it, but that's another experience. So I always say, focus on the experience you have.
Right.
Because you'll never look at something you've created or been part of and see it the way someone who wasn't there or wasn't in it will feel. I'm a huge fan of Kate Bush, a British singer-songwriter.
Yeah, she's great.
And one of the best things I ever saw was an interview with her where they, in England, she's kind of considered a genius musically. And they said, what's your favorite song? She said, I'm never happy with anything I do. And I was like, I just, I was like, huh? Like, it blew my mind. And then I was like, remember that, Lee.
Yeah.
Like, she will never, ever be grateful to herself the way you and many other people are grateful to her. But that's okay, because she's having her experience of being the creator.
Right. Wow. So, before we end up bringing out the Mystic Manor guest, I was thinking if you'd be open to it, I would love to hear from the Z's. Hopefully they're not mad at me for calling them the Zoo earlier.
They're so mad.
I would love for them to come on stage and have a little chat.
They're going to tell you who you're going to be in. When was it? 2388?
Yes, you remember the year.
I have a feeling you might be the only one of us back.
Yeah, probably.
I think you love the Earth so much. I think you're going to look the same.
And everyone's going to be at the
have
zoo.
Some kind of show on a spaceship.
Yeah. Everyone's going to be at the multidimensional zoo laughing at me sitting here all alone.
You'll be channeling all of us in this room. We'll be your guides.
Yeah, there it is. The future zoo. Thank you, guys.
Good. Welcome. It will take a moment or two to calibrate Lee's frequency to us, but we would first like to begin by saying you are all loving, open souls, and that is the currency of the future. Yes, we understand there are many other aspects of your personalities that you are having to evolve right now and to some degree go through a chrysalis phase on Earth as humanity. For yes, there is much in the way of shadow and dark and conflict energy on this planet, but those of you who are capable of cultivating open, loving energy toward the world at large, even if you are not flowing that energy in an enormously benevolent way to the person standing directly in front of you, you are needed, and this is your time. For you will see that the custodians of this planet and the energy transformation that this planet is going through will be those who are capable of holding love, compassion, and strength. But this may look like the fiercest activist you have ever met. And when you will realize this activist is working on behalf of the justice of love, you will understand that compassion as a force is what is required on your planet. And we say this not to diminish any of you who have the great intellect that will be part of building your new future. But we say it to remind you all that fully fledged and open love and compassion are the very medicine that this planet needs in order to raise its vibration. And if you yourself doubt that you are highly operational in these frequencies, we challenge you to recognize you are lying to yourself. And we understand why you would be lying to yourself, because you have all been born into a world that asks you to lie to yourselves over and over about the truth of who you are as energy beings here. And you put on your human suit, which is more than just a body. It is actually a frequency of energy field that is allowed by the other human beings. And you walk around the world trying to bring as much love and energy to the planet as you can. Well, we will tell you that this next few decades, everything is set to amplify on planet Earth. And just as some of you have been a little distressed and had to, shall we say, recalibrate your bodies to the level of chaos that you are seeing emerging and rising on the planet, we would like to point out to you that that very chaos is the fire that will sit underneath your feet where love is concerned. So you cannot have one energy rising without all energy rising. So try not to be too dismayed by what you are seeing in the chaotic or challenge side of this earth. It is not to say put your head in the sand, and if you are one who is an activist for a very direct problem that you can see on the planet right now, then by all means dive headlong into being the solution. But we would ask you all to remember to sit back and stand back and breathe into your hearts this extraordinary love and compassion that you all have access to. Because as you learn to reactivate it inside your body, you share it and emit that light for others. And that is all it takes. Yes, we know many of you are quite marvelous in what you do on Earth, but it is actually who you be that is what is most required in the years to come. And for many of you, your doings on Earth will allow you to radiate that frequency. But all you are trying to do is to light up every other soul that you meet with light. For there is a war on this planet between what you term light and dark, we would say higher and lower frequencies. And there has always been a war, and yet within that war there is also a great love. You see, those who love war love war. They are not coldly going into war, they are activated by the experience of war. But the frequency is quite low, so you do not see it as the kind of love that is of a high frequency, a love that is benevolent and giving, that generates warmth, that generates light. So try to stay a little clear of getting too separatist in the way you see others on the planet. And the more you can focus on who you are and who you are being and what you are emitting, particularly in the next 6 to 10 years, you will find you will have a quite miraculous experience of the frequency on Earth. For as much as the doom and gloom story abounds at this time, and there is much to, shall we say, grieve or adjust to on the planet at this time, there is also an enormous wave of light and love and compassion. And that does not mean you will see that in the face or the action of everybody you meet. And there will be great areas of the planet that you can see right now where people are far from that frequency. But understand that you taking an action in their direction or in any direction that holds great love and great compassion is felt through the butterfly effect. There is a ripple at work on your planet. And for those of you who see yourselves as what some of you call light workers, others call awake souls, others call beings of consciousness, understand that this personal journey that you are on is actually a collective journey. So your growth and your opening to higher frequencies is you becoming a vessel of that touch paper for others. And that, dear ones, is enough. Many of you grieve being on the earth, for you wonder why this place is so dark, when you remember everything being lighter and brighter. And what we are here to tell you is the light exists here very strongly. The challenge for you as human beings is to find it, to amplify it, and to let it run through your body regardless of the reactions of others around you and their comfort or discomfort at who you are being in any given moment. And this is the part of the human suit that is tricky. Human suits are magnetic, which means you are tribal in nature. And there is a truth to this. There is a higher frequency in your tribal nature that allows you to be telepathic. It is why you experience synchronicity. Those are the higher parts of you tuning in on the grid that you are all connected to. But if you go all the way down the scale to where the lower frequencies exist in the human consciousness field, you will also feel those like great anchors. Meaning if you are put with somebody who is cold and defended, it will take the strongest among you and the most heart-activated among you and the most open among you to hold your own frequency rather than going into a more cold or defended state in yourself. So understand what we are saying here. It is not that we are saying you must simply be open all of the time. Instead, we are saying that if you continue to cultivate light and openness and seek places where you are able to access those frequencies, much of the challenge area in your personal lives and in the effect that you have on the collective will start to dissolve naturally. So we do understand that your human suit magnetism will sometimes magnetize you to very challenging, difficult problems with other beings, situations that some part of you is resonant with, either from this lifetime or another lifetime. You will get down in the mud, as it were, because you need to learn from the mud. But we say this to those of you who are beginning to recognize you are getting down into the mud a lot less often these days. And that is because you are able to move at the speed of light more than ever before. And that speed of light is what is more available on your planet in this last couple of decades than it has been for a very, very long time. So for those of you who are harnessing that, understand you are gardeners of heart and light for others. And as you fertilize the light within yourself, you also allow it to fertilize in others. So choose where you focus more of the time and be willing to understand that even though you are in this, shall we say, challenging and chaotic time for planet Earth, for many of you, your experience of the coming years and decades is going to be quite golden. In peace and in love to all.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Whew. With that being said, I think it's a good time to bring out the incredible guests that we've had this week here at the Mystic Manor, who are brave enough to come out on stage and mix it up with the two of us. So yeah, give it up for this week's Mystic Manor guests, everyone.